Welcome to AKC Story Loom. Please don't forget to subscribe, share and comment as it means a whole lot to me. Now let's go straight into the story. The sun beat down on the parched earth, baking the air and everything in it. In a small village where every day was a fight for survival, Benson, the eldest son, felt the weight of the world on his young shoulders. His home was a tiny shack with a rusty, corrugated iron roof that rattled in the wind. Inside, the space was barely large enough for their family of four. His younger brother, Ifani, was still small, his bones thin from a lack of proper nourishment. Their parents worked tirelessly on a small plot of land, but the harvests were meager. They often went to bed with their stomachs rumbling, their dreams filled with the promise of a full meal. Benson, at 15, felt a frustration that was a physical ache in his chest. He saw no future here, only a cycle of hunger and despair. One sweltering afternoon, he packed a small, tattered bag, hugged his mother and brother, and without a word to his father, he began the long, lonely walk to the town. The town was a world away from his quiet village. It was a cacophony of sound, car horns, market traders, and the steady clang of a hammer against metal. Benson followed the sound to a small, bustling mechanic shop. The owner, a man with a booming voice and kind eyes named Engineer John, was a pillar of the community. Benson, his heart pounding, approached the man and poured out his story. He didn't just tell him about his poverty. He spoke of the fire in his belly, the desperate need to provide for his family. Engineer John listened intently, a pensive look on his face. He saw not a beggar, but a boy with a fierce resolve. He offered Benson an apprenticeship, a place to sleep, and 3 square meals a day. The mechanic shop became Benson's new home. For 7 years, he learned everything there was to know about engines. The initial frustration and bitterness he carried from the village slowly faded, replaced by the satisfaction of hard work and the pride of mastering a skill. Engineer John treated him like his own son, not just teaching him mechanics, but also instilling in him the values of honesty, hard work, and integrity. He taught Benson that a man's worth was not in his wealth, but in his character. When Benson turned 22, Engineer John held a small ceremony, a tradition for his apprentices. He gifted Benson a toolbox, a generous sum of money, and his blessing to start his own life. Benson returned to the village a new man. He was no longer the hungry boy who had left years ago. His hands were calloused from work, and his eyes held a new light, the light of purpose. His family's joy was a sight to behold. His mother cried, his father smiled with a rare warmth, and Ifani looked at him with admiration. Benson used the money Engineer John gave him to settle his family. He regularly sent money home, helping them to transition from a farming life to a small business. They bought a kiosk, and with his business acumen, the kiosk began to thrive. One evening, while checking his social media on an old phone, an advertisement caught his eye. It was a job opening for an engineer in the United States, with a company called Quanta Services. The post was made by a man named Akachi Nwagbos, the CEO of ARC Group of Companies. The world seemed to stop spinning. He signed up, filled out the forms with trembling hands, and uploaded every document he had. He barely slept for weeks, checking his email every few minutes. When the notification came, he couldn't believe his eyes. An employment mail, with an offer of free accommodation and food for 4 months. The euphoria was short-lived. A new problem arose: money for the visa and the flight ticket. Benson went to every friend and acquaintance he had helped, but no one could provide the large sum he needed. He was crushed. His hope turned into a bitter despair. In his lowest moment, he returned to his father in the village, telling him of his golden opportunity and the brick wall he had hit. His father listened, his face a mask of grief. The old man wept, a heartbreaking sound that made Benson's chest ache. There was a long silence, and then his father spoke. "There is only one thing left," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "The land. The 10 plots of land my father left me. It was for you and your brother, but your future is more important." The land was sold, a single act of immense sacrifice that would forever be etched in Benson's heart. 3 weeks later, his visa was approved. Benson's flight to America was a blur of emotion. He was seated by the window, watching the clouds below as the plane soared higher and higher, leaving his old life behind. He landed in Houston, Texas, a city of steel, glass, and a million possibilities. He was met at the airport by a company representative who welcomed him warmly. Benson rested for 3 days, marveling at the luxury of his temporary home. On his first day at work, he impressed everyone. His skills, honed by engineer John, were sharp. His work ethic was relentless. The managing director, an older, no-nonsense woman, was so impressed that she promoted him to a supervisor position within 9 months. Benson became wealthy, buying a sleek car and a beautiful house. The memory of the little shack in his village began to fade, replaced by the intoxicating reality of his new life. One evening, at a corporate event, he met Molicia. She was a stunning woman with a sharp wit and a chillingly calculating mind. She quickly captivated him, and he fell head over heels, blind to her true nature. Molicia slowly but surely began to poison his mind. "They're just using you for your money," she'd whisper when he mentioned his family. "You need to focus on your own life." He stopped answering their calls and sending money. He was in a trance. They married in a courthouse, a simple affair, but Molicia's smile on that day was one of a predator who had finally trapped its prey. She had a plan, and Benson was completely unaware. 8 months later, the plan was set in motion. Molicia filed for divorce, accusing him of cruelty. The divorce was brutal. Molicia's lawyers, well versed in their legal manipulation, proved that Benson had verbally abused her, leaving him with no leg to stand on. The court, based on her fabricated evidence, awarded all of Benson's assets to her, leaving him with nothing but the clothes on his back. The company, hearing of the scandal and seeing his dramatic decline in performance, fired him. With no job and no money, his visa was revoked, and he was deported back to Nigeria. The flight back felt 100 times longer than the flight over. He was filled with shame, regret, and a burning rage at Molicia and himself. He arrived at his old home, a broken man. The shame was a physical weight on his shoulders. His mother and siblings hugged him, their joy at seeing him mixed with concern. Then he saw a little boy, no older than 3, playing on the dirt floor. His mother explained, her voice soft, that the boy was his son, a product of a night of drunken celebration after engineer John had settled him. The final blow came when his mother tearfully told him about his father's death. The old man had passed away because they couldn't afford the treatment he needed. Benson's heart shattered. He went to his father's grave, collapsing to his knees, begging the man's spirit for forgiveness. The tears he shed were a mix of grief, regret, and a profound understanding of what he had lost. The first few days were a quiet, painful dance of unspoken emotions. Benson felt a suffocating shame. He watched his mother and siblings go about their lives, their resilience a sharp contrast to his own brokenness. His younger brother, Ifani, now a young man, approached him cautiously. "We are just happy you are back, brother," he said simply, his words a balm on Benson's bruised soul. Benson, with a heavy heart, spent his days playing with his son, the little boy a constant reminder of both his past recklessness and a new, unexpected hope. He knew he couldn't stay in the village, a ghost in the place he had once promised to save. He made a decision. He would move them to Lagos, a city he knew well, where he had a few properties he'd bought while in America, remnants of a life he'd lost. The move to Lagos was a whirlwind of activity. Benson used the last of his savings to renovate the small apartment he owned. He settled his mother, Ifani, and his son in their new home. It wasn't the mansion he had in America, but it was a solid, safe place, far from the constant reminders of their struggle in the village. He sat his family down and gave them the keys to his properties and the money from the sales. "This is for you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I will be back. I need to go away for a while to find myself again." They pleaded with him to stay, but he knew he couldn't. He needed to mourn his father and find a way to forgive himself. He gave his son one last hug, a silent promise in his touch, and he was gone. Benson traveled to a remote, quiet town in a different part of the country. He rented a small, one-room house with nothing but the clothes on his back and a heavy heart. The days were long and quiet. He spent his time in solitude, walking through the dusty streets and sitting by the river, watching the water flow. He reflected on his life, the hunger, the kindness of Engineer John, his father's sacrifice, the intoxicating greed of America, and Molicia's calculated betrayal. The rage and bitterness slowly began to fade, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. He realized that the greatest loss wasn't his money or his properties, but his character, his sense of self-worth, and his connection to his family. He spent his days not just mourning his father, but also mourning the man he had become. He worked on a farm, finding a simple peace in the toil of the earth, just like his father had. 2 years passed. The man who returned was not the desperate boy who had left the village, nor the arrogant man who had left America. He was a man with a quiet strength in his eyes and a sense of purpose. He found his family thriving. His mother was healthy and happy, and Ifani was now a successful businessman, having used the money Benson gave them to expand the kiosk into a small grocery store. He saw his son, now a bright-eyed 5-year-old, running toward him with a smile. The joy that filled the house was a powerful, tangible thing. Benson had lost everything, but in his exile and his grief, he had found something more valuable: himself. He had come home, not to a life of luxury, but to a life of family, love, and a quiet, profound happiness. He had returned to the light. Benson's return to Lagos wasn't a return to idleness. He refused to live off the properties he had left his family. He was a mechanic at heart, and he knew it was the honest work that would restore his soul. With some of the money his family had insisted he take, he rented a small, unassuming shop in a bustling part of the city. He named it Integrity Motors. The sign was simple, hand-painted, and to him, it meant everything. He started with nothing but his toolbox and the skills Engineer John had taught him. He worked from dawn until dusk, his hands stained with grease, a familiar, comforting feeling. Customers were drawn to his honesty and the quality of his work. He never overcharged and always explained the repairs in simple terms. His reputation grew, not just as a skilled mechanic, but as an honest man. One afternoon, a familiar voice called out to him. "Benson! Is that really you?" Benson looked up from the engine he was working on and saw Engineer John standing in the doorway, a broad smile on his face. He had heard about a new, honest mechanic in Lagos and decided to investigate. The reunion was emotional. Engineer John hugged him, patting his back. He didn't ask about America or the lost wealth. He simply looked at Benson's hands, then at the sign above the door, and his eyes filled with a quiet pride. "You've come a long way, son," he said. "The world tested you, but you came back to what truly matters. Your father would be proud." His words were a final, healing balm on Benson's soul. A few months later, as Benson was driving home in his refurbished car, he saw a woman standing on the side of the road. Her clothes were disheveled, and her face was thin and haggard. It was Molicia. His heart skipped a beat, but instead of the burning hatred he used to feel, he felt a strange, detached sense of pity. He learned from a friend that she had lost all the money he had left her on poor investments, and had been abandoned by her new friends. She had come to Nigeria looking for new opportunities, or perhaps to find someone to take advantage of. She didn't see him as he drove past, and Benson didn't stop. He had closed that chapter of his life. Years passed, and Benson's shop thrived. It was no longer a small, unassuming place. It had expanded into a successful business with several apprentices of its own. He never forgot his roots, and every apprentice he took on, he taught not just the skills of mechanics but the importance of integrity, just as Engineer John had taught him. His son, now a young boy, would often come to the shop after school, his face a perfect mix of his father's gentle eyes and a playful curiosity. Benson had lost a fortune and a life of luxury, but in return, he had found something far more valuable: a loving family, an honest profession, and the peace that comes from a life well lived. He had come full circle, no longer running from his past, but building a future rooted in the lessons of his journey. We've come to the end of the story. What are your thoughts? What did you learn? Please drop in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and comment. Thank you and God bless you.